A wild horse became trapped in deep mud and couldn't free itself for hours. In Alberta, Canada, prolonged rains had turned the area into a sea of mud. This led to the wild horse falling into a large mud pit while running swiftly along the edge of the forest. As soon as it fell into the mud, the horse tried with all its strength to pull itself out but couldn't succeed. Instead, the mud began to cover its entire body, and it started sinking deeper into the swamp. Panicking, the horse struggled desperately to escape, but the more it tried, the deeper it sank. It attempted to cling to the edge with its front legs. Even though its powerful hind legs accounted for most of the horse's strength, they weren't enough to save it. It was completely stuck. The poor animal could do nothing but helplessly thrash about. The horse struggled for hours, trying to free itself from the mud. At times, it seemed as though it might break free, only to sink back into the mire. Exhausted and worn out, every movement just pulled it deeper. Finally, drained of energy, it lay still in the mud. Breathing heavily, the horse felt a growing despair, as though it would never escape. No one seemed to be coming to its rescue, and this hopelessness only deepened its sense of abandonment. Even if it had cried out for help, there was no one nearby to hear. Everything pointed to the horse living out its final moments. But then something unexpected happened. A man appeared at the edge of the forest, Darrell Clever, a local farmer. Darrell, who kept horses at his nearby farm, was quite familiar with these four-legged creatures. That day, he had been walking in the forest, marking trees he could cut for use. Suddenly, an unusual sound caught his attention, stopping him in his tracks. Curious about the source of the sound, Darrell began searching and eventually spotted the horse stuck in the mud from a distance. At first, he didn't realize how serious the situation was, but after watching the wild horse struggle for a few minutes, Darrell understood the gravity of the situation. The horse was desperately trying to free itself, but to no avail. Seeing the horse fighting for its life, Darrell couldn't just stand by. The poor animal needed saving. He rushed over to assess the situation, ran to his truck, grabbed a rope, and attempted to lasso the horse. However, horses are far heavier than the average person, and no matter how hard Darrell tried, the horse didn't budge an inch. Realizing it was impossible to free the horse on his own, he quickly came up with a new plan. Darrell ran back to his truck, grabbed some hay and water, and returned to the horse. He fed it and gave it water to drink. Then he drove swiftly to town to get help. 45 minutes later, Darrell returned to the forest, this time with a few members of the Barre family. With more people, their chances of freeing the horse were higher. They had also brought 2 off-road vehicles with them, which they hoped to use in the rescue. They quickly devised a plan. They would attach harnesses to the horse and connect a rope to the vehicles. By pulling with the off-road vehicles, they hoped to drag the horse out of the swamp, and they hoped this plan would work, but there was no guarantee. No one was certain the rescue operation would succeed. Still, the small team moved quickly to carry it out. They placed the harnesses around the tired and weary horse. The animal no longer had the strength to resist and seemed to understand that the people were trying to save it. The off-road vehicles began pulling gently at first, then with increasing force. They were ready to stop at any sign of the horse being in pain. But the horse showed no discomfort. It seemed more determined than ever to regain its freedom. After a few tries, the horse began to move. Darrell saw this as a positive sign, though he knew there was still a long way to go. He got out of the vehicle and adjusted the harness to the other side of the horse. Before climbing back into the vehicle, he made sure the ropes and harnesses were secure and wouldn't slip. Then they resumed pulling. Miraculously, the horse began inching its way out of the swamp. Sensing that it was finally escaping, the horse redoubled its efforts. Its legs kicked with more vigor, and it pushed itself with all its remaining strength. Suddenly, it broke free of the mud and regained its freedom. The horse stood proudly, letting out a triumphant neigh. Darrell and his team quickly moved to remove the harnesses and cleaned off the surface mud from its body. The group applauded, cheering and congratulating each other on the successful rescue. But just as they were celebrating, the young horse did something surprising and unexpected. It turned, slowly approached them, and bowed its large head, locking eyes with Darrell and the others. It was as if the horse wanted to thank them for their kindness, gently nodding forward. Darrell didn't know how to respond. He simply reached out and stroked the magnificent animal's nose. Fighting back tears, Darrell felt a deep sense of pride in his chest. The wild horse turned and galloped away, rejoicing in its newfound freedom as it disappeared into the wild. Please don't forget to like the video, share it with your loved ones, and subscribe to the channel.